What's up, man?
Yo, how's it going?
Bro, it's a good day. Did you hear, man? They just opened up so churches could open.
Yeah, no
So,
way.
yeah, the president just made an announcement, man, pretty much saying that churches need to be allowed to open as of today. So, don't know what it's going to look like, but it's still pretty good news.
Right? We all
So, pretty much, I think he just deemed churches essential. So,
come on.
I think that's pretty powerful.
That's amazing.
Yeah, I know. I've been talking to Ben. You guys have been doing a great job just holding down the virtual, man. How's the virtual world been?
It's been it's kind of crazy because I think the initial just shift, man, going from full on services to I think that it went from one weekend to the very next weekend. It was like 10 of us in a room, doing a service. So that was a little crazy. But I think now, even as we've gotten into it, it's been cool to see what God's doing in the midst of it. It's been cool to see kind of what we've all been talking about it, and certainly this whole time, but even just the refinement that's happening.
Yeah.
Having to strip everything away, and you can't rely on all the things that maybe worked before.
It's true.
Having to come in there and go, we're going to have to really bring something real if it's going to translate to our church on that Sunday morning.
So good.
Just roll through the motions. And so, but it's been great. I think that's kind of the challenge we want in front of us all the time.
That's so good, man. I know we just did so we do a Monday morning service, and we just recorded this last week. And to be honest, was probably the first Monday I felt like Holy Spirit crazy in the room.
Yeah.
Our first Monday, we were scrambling like most, man. I didn't know. It was so funny. We set up a couch. I had like slippers on. I didn't even know they could see my feet. I had slippers. The guy next to me was leading worship in his socks. It was just it was so terrible. And to see where it's gotten now, man, I'm so thankful for the virtual world, and I'm thankful for just that in this season, I felt like we just kept giving, no matter what it looked like. When I was in schools, man, it'd be preaching in gymnasiums. In this last season, it's been preaching on an iPhone. If I didn't have a pulpit, I had a phone,
Yeah.
So, but.
Yeah, it's true. I think the ability for us to even to just be shaken up a bit and have to get back on our toes and innovate and figure out, hey, how would we do this? How are we going to navigate all these pieces? Or even, there's been, that's just the service element. The other part of it has been how you connecting with teams and passing people in this time. And, we're all joking about the million Zoom calls. I just got off one. But I mean, yeah, it's kind of amazing because even, I was just talking with someone, and it's like, of course we want to get back and gather. And I think it's amazing for us to all have that perspective of, man, were we taking this for granted in the last
True.
Year, that we could come together, that we could worship, that I could hug everybody on my team. Like, I can't wait. I'm a hugger, man. This is not right.
Yeah.
So, but also, it's been cool to see the church pivot and innovate. And I think we were just talking about, a lot of times if I was going to go and connect with a team or pour into a team or something, I'm hopping on a plane and I'm cruising over, and I love that, and all that's amazing. But it's also been incredible to see how in this time we're innovating, and man, I could hop on a Zoom call with a team and actually have like a focused, solid hour, no jet lag, cup of coffee, and probably give people some of my best. And so I'm excited to even see on the other side of this how, as we jump back in and as we can gather again and worship, I'm excited to see what does it look like when we aren't taking that for granted. And, we've all been daydreaming about what's like service one look like when we get to come back and worship. But also the way we're going to grab on and hold on to some of these tools. I know some people Instagram live all the time. I've probably done it like 2 times before.
Wow.
So even the ability to hop on and communicate, or even for me as a worship leader and a songwriter to hop on and share songs more, it's like it's made me be more innovative. So there's definitely some good coming out of it for sure.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. I think it's crazy. We've been on social presence, but we felt like this last season we started doing just these talks. We've had Todd, Lou, Pastor Banning, Chandler Moore, Crystal's with us.
Yeah.
You know, and it's been awesome because I feel like there's been streams we've been able to connect with people where just people don't have time to fly out always and do stuff here, and we've been re-airing, man, a lot of the lives that are on YouTube and just been getting such incredible responses. So we're super honored, man. I was so bummed I couldn't be out there. I know your wife and you were planning that conference. I'm not gonna lie, it was a dream come true that you guys even reach out to ourselves in one voice. I was seriously fangirling for a little bit, like, oh my God, I get to be at something Jesus culture's doing. Like, I've admired Jesus culture since I got saved. I got saved in '09. No. I got saved in '07. And since then, I mean, I've been introduced to Jesus culture and what you guys were doing. And so I was really looking forward to being there, man. But hopefully in the future we'll be able to come out there and do something with you guys.
For sure. We will do it again. That's for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, man. No, I appreciate that so much. And yeah, we were so excited, man. We were so bummed. And even for a lot of people maybe didn't know, we had a youth conference that literally was supposed to kick off like 2 days before the shutdown from the federal standpoint. So it was crazy, man. It was so we had to pivot and change that. But but we'll definitely have to get you out. It's gonna be awesome.
Yeah, man. Well, man, I love to jump in. I know my wife, kind of the tradition I've had for these is just kind of conversation-based questions, and my wife has always crafted out good conversational questions. And so really quick, you're married. How long have you been married?
Yeah, we've been married 11. It'll be 12 years this August.
Wow.
So 12 years, and then 2 kiddos. My oldest is 6 years old, and the daughter Lucy. And then my son Julian is 2 years old. So
that's awesome, man.
7 years, 2 kids. And then actually Becky and I met when we were like 15, and she was 15, I was 17. So we've been dating and married for a combined 16 years.
Wow, that's incredible. What advice would you give as a husband? Like, you've been married for 11 years, you said.
Yeah.
2 kids. What advice has been key for you throughout the entire thread of 11 years? Like, what's one thing you're like, man, like this one thing, if you can grab one thing from my 11 years, this is be like what I would say.
Oh man. Well, it's probably the same idea, but I think there's overlap in it. And it's just the idea. It takes a while to figure out, but that you just can't control people. And all of us should know as people that the moment people raise your anxieties, right? i.e., they did something in a way that I wouldn't do it.
Yeah.
Anxiety, and then our instinct almost is like, well, how do I get you to stop doing that? Or how do I convince control you that that's the wrong way of doing it, whatever. So funny because, if you're with anyone for any length of time, that anxiety is going to pop up a ton, especially if you're following the Lord and God's doing stuff in you and he's changing you. Like, if you look at the 17-year-old kid that my wife met when she first met me to the man I am today, I've went through so many iterations of myself. God just refined me and changed things and changed habits and patterns. We laugh all the time. It's like when we first got married, by comparison, I was just kind of a more messy person than she was. I'm not very messy, but by comparison, I was pretty messy. And it's funny because I was like, well, we got married. I was 20 years old. Like, I'm still a kid. Now to me at 33, I'm like, I'm going around cleaning up most of the time, right? That's just kind of And so I think as you get into any kind of serious relationship, you just have to let there be room for each other to grow, and you will grow and you will change, and God will put stuff in you. And I think we often wrestle with, well, hey, that's not how you were, last month. And it's like, yeah, totally. Cause I'm changing. I'm still being transformed. I'm still
so good.
I'm still discovering myself. And I think we're always going to be on that journey. So for her and I, we've had to find that rhythm of, I want to be there to celebrate. And it's hard to do, but I want to be there to celebrate when God moves you forward in something, even if it's it's different. It makes me uncomfortable. It makes me feel anxious or whatever. But there's that. I want to celebrate you as you change and as you grow and continue to learn
Wow.
who you are, who you're becoming. But man, I mean, these are muscles that you have to flex for years. I'm still
Yeah.
working on them all the time.
Yeah, man, that's so good, man. And did you guys meet in ministry? Was that where you guys met? Was it at Bethel? Was it?
Yeah, so we oddly enough we met at an Acquire the Fire conference.
Okay, Ron Luce.
Yeah, Ron Luce.
Yeah.
So we met in the Acquire the Fire conference, but actually in that season, neither one of us were following the Lord. I
Wow.
went because I was like, my sister-in-law talked me into going, and so I went. And Becky went basically as a punishment. She was in trouble, and her mom's like, "You're going to this thing," so she went, and we both went. And although there actually were some like supernatural, just God doing stuff in the room at that conference.
Yeah.
We didn't have a grid for it, but God was moving. He was doing stuff. But we left that conference with with a boyfriend and a girlfriend. That's what we got out of it initially. But what was crazy, I mean, so yeah, when we first started dating, we weren't following the Lord at all. We were partying, we were doing all the stuff. And really in the same season, we both ended up kind of getting talked into going to this Vineyard church where we grew up. And we're both from out in the Midwest, so we grew up out in Indiana.
Yeah.
But we ended up going to this Vineyard church, and it just kickstarted this season of God pursuing us. We came in as like the two rocker stoner kids hanging out in the back of the church. Don't want to come up front.
Wow.
You're new. You just hang out in the back, right?
Yeah.
And then slowly but surely, man, God was just pursuing us, and the people there, they loved us so incredibly. I'll never forget, showing up thinking, and I hadn't grown up in church or anything, so I was expecting like, when's the person going to come up and talk about my sin or like kick me out of the door because I've got long hair and I'm dressed like a rocker or whatever. And just didn't encounter that at all, man. Those people who were like, "Derek, we're so glad that you're here. Gosh, we're so like haven't seen you in a couple of so glad you're here. Give me a big hug." I'm like, I've never been around anybody this kind. What's going on here? And that's honestly what began to woo our hearts towards Jesus.
So good.
Man, these guys they have a joy and a kindness I'm just not seeing anywhere else.
Wow.
And that's really what kickstarted it. So, we've got to grow up together, practically, but we've gotten to grow up together in the Lord, which has been challenging, but also really beautiful. I can look back and we both know the season of God speaking to us, God calling us out of darkness, God speaking destiny over our lives, and
so good.
Having it happen at the same time,
So good.
Real gift in marriage for sure.
And do you come from a background of Jesus? Does your family have a background of Jesus? Like, I don't know much of your family background.
Yeah. So, I mean, for me, just kind of in my immediate family, my parents, when I was young, they weren't going to church at all. My dad worked a full-time job and then was like a front man singing in like a bar band and like rock and roll.
Oh, wow.
On the weekends, out in like the Chicagoland area, just gigging out and playing in clubs and stuff. So that was really like, you talked about what defined my weekends as a childhood. It wasn't church. It was like you go out and you play gigs or you're doing a thing. So even before I met Jesus and started following the Lord, I was in bands. I was a songwriter. I was wanting to be a rock star. That was totally the path that I was on. And because that was all I ever knew, So I step into a church. That's my only grid, even for music or anything.
Yeah.
And starting to sense the Holy Spirit and worship. I'm like, what is going on? So no, I didn't grow up in the church. Becky had a little bit more of an upbringing in it, but also grew up in a home where there was just a lot of pain and dysfunction. And stuff going on. So yeah, man, it was not necessarily a background. I have, there's kind of those heroes of the faith though along the way. I have a grandfather who, my mom will tell me all the time, like the memory she has of him is that he'd be reading his word and he'd be praying all the time. Wow. And then I truly believe that so much of the fruit in my life, so much of the stuff I've stepped into is because I had had a grandfather who was praying, right? Had someone who was praying that the lineage that would come from him would just know the Lord and they'd follow the Lord. And my mom, same thing as I started to step into my teenage years. I had a mom who was at home every night, watching TVN, praying for her son,
Wow.
out trying to be a rock star. And they would, my mom and my dad, because they really did come to the Lord in those years when I was a teenager, but they'd be, up in my room, anointing instruments and praying over my room. And that is the reason I'm here. I know it, it's just that God was answering prayer. And my parents kind of woke up to the way that we were raised and realized, man, we need to do a shift and walk through that for sure.
So what age did you get saved at?
Yeah, I was 17 when Becky and I went to that Acquire the Fire thing, and to be honest, I had a salvation moment. There were times we kind of come in and out of church, little bits here and there. I did have a salvation moment when I was about 9 years old.
Yeah.
Did like an all-night church lock-in, and I remember I raised my hand and like, okay, I'm in.
Yeah.
But I walked away from that thinking, cool, I checked that box, I'm saved. I'm still going to go out, I'm going to party and do the rock star thing, and God, I'll come back to you and serve you one day. And that was kind of my mentality. But really the all-in moment was like around 17 and 18. And it, for most of us, it was a season. It was a process.
Yeah.
I'm up at the altar and then,
Yeah.
oh no, falling away from the Lord for the next 3 weekends. But then I come back again and God's pursuing me again. And,
Wow.
and one of the things I love, and it gave me, I think for people who haven't maybe walked through that season, when you walk through that, I walked away realizing God's grace is so real. It's so true. Like he really wasn't out to judge me. He wasn't out to condemn me. The Lord was desperately trying to rescue me from a path that I was headed down. And so I really cherish those, even that back and forth, and it felt so silly, and my own wrestle with sin and humanity, and just like, okay, can I just surrender? And okay, God, you have my whole life, but there is something in that process where you just learn. It's almost like I needed to be convinced.
Yeah.
You're not going to reject me. And so I'd have a moment, God, you love me, you're passionate about me, and then I'm like, yeah, but I'm gonna do some stuff to prove that you're out to reject me, right? It's that thing that people go through, and that was just never the case. It was God going, listen, I'm here, man. I'm going to rescue you out of this stuff. So I cherish those moments,
I don't know if you know much of my story. I have a very little similar story. I was a musician before. At 15, I was playing in bars and nightclubs up in NorCal, up in the Sacramento area. They would let me in, I'd play, and then I'd have to bounce. But when I got saved, very similar, wanted to be a rock star, and I was an atheist. I got radically saved. And I know that in my walk, there's moments where I would feel like this is just too hard. The torn part I was in was I loved God so much. I was so thankful, but there was a real pull and struggle on my life. I mean, I remember this one moment I even grabbed my Bible and I chucked it against the wall, and I'm like, I can't do this anymore. And then like 20 seconds later, I'm crawling. I'm like, I'm sorry. I'm crying my eyes out. Did you ever have a moment where in your walk, because I know people see you now, they see you on stages, they see you write music, they see you married, they see your Instagram, which, Instagram depicts such a very small portion of our real lives. But was there ever a moment where you had a Bible chucking moment where you're like, I just don't want God, I freaking love you, but I can't do this. Like, I don't know how I'm going to get through this. Did you ever have a moment where you just felt like even like your faith was just being rocked?
Oh man, absolutely. I really think that even for us as leaders or people who would come along and try to disciple people and what it looks like to follow Jesus, that is a side of the story we have to be better at teaching about and talking about. Because man, so I've been following the Lord since I was 17, 18 years old, right? So that's like 16 years of all the seasons of life that I've walked through, through getting married. And even my wife and I, we both be the first to tell you that even after, like, we went through a year of ministry school, we got married, And our first year of marriage was chaotic. We tell people all the time, it's like you wouldn't know this from Instagram or whatever,
Yeah.
but probably 9 months into our first year of marriage, and we were kids. My wife tells a story laughing about she was online Googling, like, how do you get a divorce? Because we don't know anything. So
Yeah.
kids who got married trying to navigate life.
Wow.
And so, there were those seasons, and then, just the change of parenting, and even the ups and downs of, doing ministry, and the expectations of what you thought things would look like, or following dreams or pursuing passions. Like, dude, I've had so many ups and downs, it's insane. So, but, to really answer your question more pointedly, I think it was probably about 2.5 years ago. It was a season right before my son was born. And I just remember, man, it's I think for me as a husband and as a father and just as a follower of Jesus, it was one of the hardest seasons I've ever walked through. I probably, and I'm really not like a depressed guy.
Yeah.
But man, was definitely fighting depression in that season, and
Wow.
and just even for me, looking at different things of, my certain expectations I had for things weren't panning out. Even I would say in my walk with the Lord, there was just like, it was almost like what worked in the seasons before aren't working.
That's real. Yeah.
And wow, like what now? What do I do? I don't even know how to connect with the Lord in a way that feels as meaningful as it did in the past. And so, man, the Lord in that season, just I remember like bringing him all that hardness of heart. I remember bringing him all that disappointment, all the frustrations. And what I learned about the Lord in that season is he's not afraid of our doubts. He's not afraid of our fears. He's not afraid of our internal mess, And I thought that he was. And it's funny because it was almost like me back at the altar at 17 and 18 again, going,
Yeah.
God, if I bring you my mess, I think you might reject me. That's really what I was afraid of, right? And so being in that season, this is only, again, it's like 2.5 years ago, and bringing all that to the Lord. I'll never forget. I had this moment. I was in the shower. The shower, for some reason, for me, is like this space where I pray and I connect with the Lord.
Come on.
But I remember being there, and I forget exactly what it was that I said, right? But I vented the big thing, like, God, I'm wrestling with my connection with you, whatever the thing was. And I remember the Lord just so gently, he was like, oh, finally.
Wow.
Finally, you're bringing it to me. And he just began to unravel this process, and I really had this beautiful kind of, I think what was happening to me in that season, and I'm long-winded, so forgive me, but
no, it's good.
Season, what the rub was actually is that I was learning how to be a son, and I didn't know how to do that. I really didn't know how to do that. Like, I didn't know how to go to my Father in heaven and say, Father, I'm scared about this. I'm anxious about this. I'm disappointed about this. And allow him to comfort me and speak to me and dust me off, right? And this is what a father does.
Wow.
So it really took me the experience of having a son, and man, it rocked me. I've had a daughter, and so much about that experience has changed me.
Yeah.
But there was something about having a boy, having my son, who I could see so much of me in him, and I could feel just kind of what I really began to feel was how the Father must feel about me. And it was like all these walls and things just started to kind of come down. So what's crazy, to get really practical with people, what was crazy is that on the other side of that season, what looking like a son has looked like for me is that at least in my walk with the Lord, in my disciplines with the Lord, they're way less feelings based than they used to be.
So good.
You be like, I'm going to read the Bible when I feel like it. I'm going to pray when I feel like it.
That's
and
real.
There's almost this resolve in me now that says, I was I was led by my emotions and my feelings because I had this disconnect between me and the Father. Like it was like I feel like a son only when I feel like it. I don't believe I am a son all the time,
Man.
regardless of how I feel. So something about that, man, it shook that up. So even now, it's like something my wife and I do daily, whether it's in the morning or it's before we're going to bed. But before the day ends, man, I'm spending time in the Word, and I don't actually care what my feelings are saying about it. They're actually irrelevant,
Wow.
because every time I come to the Word, what I'm connecting with is what I feel like is that God's fathering me. Every time I'm in it, man. Every time I'm in the Word,
So good.
I feel the Lord. It's like taking me by the hand. He's walking me, saying, "Son, this is what you need to know about life. This is what you need to know about my character. This is what you need to know about the history of our people and how we've been walking this thing out."
So
So
good.
it was a process, man,
Yeah.
of dealing with the orphan areas in me.
That's
For
so
sure.
good. You know, man, actually, I'm preaching a message this Monday called The Gospel of Feelings. And
Yeah.
I feel like that's so key. You know, talk about depression. I've actually battled, and I don't really share this often, but I've battled in my walk with God in 10 years. There's definitely moments of depression that I would go through. My own walk, man, I have really big highs, and then I'd have really moments where I just feel like, man, I just feel like trash, you know. And it's hard because sometimes you're leading, and you don't really have anywhere to go to when you're in that place. You're just kind of trying to make it, you know. And I don't know, man, what you're saying is so key. I think even openly saying, man, as a believer, like when we battle depression, we battle this emotion of feeling unworthy, but it doesn't mean we follow that, you know.
Yeah.
Even hearing your story where you'd have these moments and your wife Googling, like, had you followed your feelings in that present time, you would have not been on the other side of blessing. You would have been on the other side of following your feelings. And I think that's where most believers miss it, is it's not that they don't go through stuff, it's that they quit right before the breakthrough.
Yeah.
Or they bounce right before, man. I mean, what would you say to someone watching? Maybe depression has been something that's been like hitting them. And I mean, you know, you're a songwriter. I feel like, which I want to ask you, I feel like your music stems from the place of your brokenness. Your music has stemmed. There's been songs that you've probably written in those dark seasons, like David. What would you say to someone that they're battling? Felt like, man, I don't feel God. I don't feel led. I hear this all the time. I've heard this before. I don't feel the Lord leading me in that way. Or I feel like there's some things that whether you feel led or not, you just got to be faithful in them. What would you say, man?
Yeah, that's good. I mean, a few things that come to mind. I think one of them, and it might be a weird dot to connect for people, but I know for me it has been some of the issue I've had to wrestle with. It has been even with the situation of feeling things like depression or feeling emotions that are just tanking me low. And the same thing, and I probably have a similar cadence in my life where I can have really high highs and then there'll be dips, right? Sometimes that moment. But what I've found in those moments is that a lot of what I was wrestling. So I'm not putting everyone who feels depression in this box. I'm just saying maybe explore this and go, I wonder if that's me.
Yeah.
For me, I was humility was getting formed in me, to be honest. That's what it was. Is that a lot of times those depressive states were coming out of my own pride being kicked. Simply maybe because I don't know how to feel better, and I don't know how to make that circumstance better. And somewhere in that spot of I can't fix it, was this deep wrestle. And so what I've found, and it's kind of a rhythm I'm trying my best to just submit to, is in those moments, how do I come to a place of just humility? God, I don't know. Because then it makes the connection to the Lord, I think, a little bit easier. It's like I shared in what
Yeah.
I was sharing a moment ago. It's that moment of I'm in the shower, I'm with the Lord. My pride was the thing that didn't want to come before the Lord and say, here's what I'm wrestling with. Here's what I'm battling. And maybe it's pride. Maybe it was a lack of trust that he'd meet me in it. It could be
Yeah.
all those things. But I think that's part of it, is that if we can take those moments, those low moments, and in humility, just lay them out before the Lord. And I think, like you're talking about, the psalmist, right? David, he did this so exceptionally well. here I am, God. I'm looking right. There's an army in front of me, and I can see it. It's not going anywhere. It's right here. And so I'm going to tell you how I feel about it. I'm going to vent my frustrations and my doubts. I'm going to lay it all on the table.
So
And
good.
then what happened? All of a sudden, he lays it all out, and then I believe
Yeah.
God would come and speak, right? God would come and begin to strengthen David, and he'd go, okay, I see it. There might be an army, but you're the God of angel armies. You can overcome that thing.
Wow.
So I think there's something about it, and we don't want to embrace it, right? I mean, who actively says, like, you know what, when I'm feeling a ton of pain, I just grab hold of it, no problem. I hold on to it. No, man, we're trying everything we can to avoid pain. And so if we can find rhythms that when there's pain, when there's depression, when
Yeah.
there's frustration, when there's a dip in the emotions, how do I
Yeah. So
use all
good.
as an indicator that I need to come
So
before
good.
and I need to go, God, what's your strategy? Because I don't have one. I got a
Yeah.
bunch of pain. I don't have a strategy. So I need you to speak.
You know, I think too, man, pain a lot of times to me is mercy because it points to the real problem. And
Yes.
so many believers, we want to shove down moments of pain
Yeah.
in the name of being strong. I mean, trust me, man, I lead a community. I can't tell you how many times I've had to put on a smile when I'm absolutely destroyed on the inside. Or I'm on my way to a conference and I just feel like crap, or I'm tired, or I don't want to get up there and admit I'm tired. Try to be real spiritual, I'll rock a little bit, you know, maybe speaking a tongue or two. And it's like you almost try to kickstart yourself out of something instead of embracing, saying, it's like I don't know, like my knee's hurting and I'm just like, well, I'm just going to take an Advil and keep on going. Well, there's a reason that pain is pointing to something deeper. And man, I don't know, when I think of longevity, you know, Ravi Zacharias just passed, and you've seen Ryan Harbonke, and you've seen Billy Graham. When I look at these men, I'm like, the success of their lives wasn't what they did. It was how they finished. It was that these men finished well. And honestly, I was telling Marcella, my wife, I was like, man, there's just this like, not this fear in me, but there's almost like this anxiousness sometimes of like, when I look at my generation, man, do we have those Zachariases? Do we have these Grahams? Do we have these Bonkies who have the character and the endurance to withstand what these men have withstood? Because we've been so grafted in a culture of feelings. We've been grafted in a culture of applause. So most people, I think, in quarantine, including myself, we freaked out for a little bit because everything we boasted in is gone. For me, I've boasted in the fact that One Voice reaches 17,000 kids a week. That's a boasting mechanism for me. When every school in America shut down, you've shut down, in essence, the fruit of our ministry. Now we're left with just who are we as people.
Yeah.
You know, and I was telling my wife, like, literally the weekend it happened, I was supposed to be with you guys. I was going to Argentina for the Sen. I had so many speaking engagements, all canceled. And now I'm stuck at home with myself. You know, I've did every project I could think of. I've drove everyone, including the dog, crazy. I mean, and the reality of this last season for me has been very much embracing how jacked up Brian Barcelona still is and how much I absolutely need Jesus just as bad as the people I preach to.
Yeah.
So,
Man.
yeah,
and,
man.
know, it's so real. And I think one of the things that as we all navigate, and even our generation of leaders as we press forward, I do think that message of humility, man, that's going to be the thing. Because, you know, even for anybody listening to this, like, the trap of any of this stuff is that for any of us, if you don't think that you'll have a bent to chase the platform or to chase the round of applause or the claps or the high fives, man, then you're not awake to the fact that you're a human being with feelings, and those feelings, they get hijacked by stuff all the time. And so I think you're exactly right. It's that in these, particularly in these moments when I can sit back and I go, okay, when I strip all of that stuff away, what is the reason that I'm following Jesus?
It's true.
And for me, it's this spot of like, and I really mean this as practically as I can mean it. If you took away the platform, if you took away all the influence, I need to read the Word every day so that I can be the husband I want to be, so I can be the father that I want to be, so I can be the neighbor that I want to be. And I think once you start getting there, now you're tapping into the essence of the kingdom and the essence of what the gospels, the essence of what the personhood of Jesus was modeling, is that Jesus was the kind of guy that if you followed him around in his everyday 9 to 5, we were just reading this the other day, right? It's in Luke 9 where the miracle of the where he multiplies the food.
Yeah.
And, you know, the setup to that was they were trying to get away from the people. I'm trying to get away from all the activity and all the stuff and all the busyness because he was tired. And even in that spot, people come to him in need. And because he's living with such a life of humility and overflow and compassion, and he doesn't actually need the applause of everybody, all of a sudden he's able to come with not just a little bit of bread, right? Not like, here's my little bit of extra because I can put on the show and the song and dance for you. But Jesus comes with the miraculous breakthrough of the kingdom. And here he is showing up and saying, not only can I feed a couple of you, I can feed all of you because I'm not doing it for your applause. I'm here to be a source, you know. I'm doing it for the real reasons. And I love that, man. I think for us as leaders, and you talk about Ravi and all these different people who've just come before us, I think they're ones who they were put on a platform because of what was happening deep down in the foundations. And we all would know not everybody gets on a platform because of that. But man, we should make sure that that's why we're there. If we're there, it's because God's doing something deep in us.
So true, man. And I think too, man, I really enjoy this. Honestly, I enjoy conversations with people my age because I feel like I speak, you know, we just did a FaceTime with Lou for like 30 minutes yesterday. And I so love speaking to fathers and mothers, but I feel like kind of my own generation, there's these questions of like, how the heck are we going to, I mean, the world is changing and the world's morality is changing. And 6 months ago, if someone would have said churches will be shut down on Easter, everyone would have laughed and said, you're insane. That'll never happen. And I feel like we're living in such an interesting season. Even the views of mental health and the views, you see pastors committing suicide now. You're seeing so much of this. I think there needs to be open spaces for conversation, but that's not on the spectrum of the negative. I feel like that's what I always get. It's more of people that have conversation from the reaction to situations versus standing on the side of the gospel saying, hey, I totally get that there needs to be, you know, counseling and there needs to be these type of things. But man, what about the laying on of hands? What about prayer? What about, you know, I understand there's hotlines for all these different issues you're going through, but when's the last time, honestly, you just got around a bunch of old intercessors? You know, I feel like, man, you're going through something, you get around a bunch of, you know, get around 5 or 6 grandmas who've been in the faith for 50 years. And I know it may be weird. Let them put this stuff called oil on their hands and just kind of rub it together and just lay it on you. Believe that God can do something. I feel like kind of those old ways, man, the Lord wants to kind of reinstitute, not old wineskins, not trying to go back to old methodology, but really like, how do we embrace what worked in previous generations? What did Ravi do that got him to defend the faith the way he did? What did Billy Graham do that got him to finish well? What the heck did Bonnke do when his 30,000 member tent was shredded in Africa? And he was probably so discouraged. I feel like that's been a moment right now. God shredded our tents. He shredded all of our ministries to the ground in a way, not directly, but almost that's what in a ways happened. And we're left now with the reality of saying, okay, does Jesus culture still have a church if they don't have a building? Does One Voice still have a ministry if every school's shut down? And I just think, man, like that rawness of not following just so we feel is so powerful, man.
Yeah, you know, and it's always it's just one of the difficult things I think about building anything, leading anything is, you know, we all would say this, but it's like the moment you're doing it to just keep people happy, you're not leading anymore.
Wow. Dang, that's so good.
I think that's what, and it's actually one of the things I've loved. I really thank the Lord for the perspective I've been able to gain just from like traveling around and doing ministry in different environments, even just as a worship leader. It's kind of a practical worship leader thing, but I think it's a practical part about leadership too. It's like the amount of times I've stepped into environments that maybe, weren't like the culture that I come from. They weren't as free in worship as the one that I come from. That how easily could it have been for me to step in there and just kind of water everything back just to keep everyone comfortable? But that's not what I'm called to do. And the amount of times I've stepped into an environment where it's a different place than the one I come from, but if I come in and I lead, and my main concern is not whether or not everyone in the room gets it, or whether or not everyone in the room leaves and they're not
Yeah.
unaffected. The moment all that goes out the window, now I can actually step into a spot of I'm gonna lead us into something. And I think we just have to do that as leaders. We just have to be willing to, take the high fives and take the insults that come with all of it.
So good.
It's just no way to walk the line perfectly where you're going to keep everyone happy or you're going to make everyone mad. I mean, both of those are indicators that you're probably doing something wrong. So,
Yeah, so good. What's the most profound song you've ever written that you feel like, man, this is a song that has touched the earth, it has touched souls. So even if it's one that's super known or one that's maybe not even so much known, what's been a song for you that you would listen to and you could worship, listening almost to yourself because it's that real and raw for you?
yeah, it's funny. I mean, I think the one that comes to mind, and it is one. It's funny. It's one that is typically listened to the most, but it's also one that I have led the least, like in all the years of traveling. But it's a song called "Glory Come Down" that I wrote years ago, and it's so funny about that song. Unlike most songs, I was actually just writing down a prayer. That's it. There was nothing like I wrote it kind of in one pass. It was just a real simple prayer, but it's funny the content of that song. I know I wrote it when I was like 23 or 24 or something. It's been about 10 years now. But the content of that song is, it feels like if I had a refined message right now, I'm like, it's that song. Like, what 10 years later, what I've come back to is that's still the prayer. God, would you open the heavens? Would you let your glory come down? It's been the thing I've been talking to with our worship team here lately, right? This is 2 Chronicles chapter 7. Solomon builds the temple. He prays a prayer. He dedicates the temple, and then it talks about the glory of the Lord fills the temple, and it fills it in such a way that the priests can't fit in the building. I'm like, dude, I've not seen that yet. That's what I'm hungry for. That's what I want to see happen. That's what I want our meetings to be about. And the cool thing about that story is it says that the temple was filled with God's glory, and then the nation, their response was worship, right? You're talking about like, boom, there's revival in the moment because the glory
So
fills
good.
God. So, man, that's what that song was about. That's what I wrote about. I didn't even know what I was talking about. I was writing down a prayer, and so for me, that I love that song. It's one that feels like it carries a weight that I was not even awakened to at the moment.
Wow, that's so powerful, man. Wow. And what has it been like in Jesus culture? What has it been like working with worship leaders that have done things around the world? When you first came in, was it something you were like just immediately acclimated to, or was there a journey working with Kim and working with Chris and kind of the dynamics of banding? I don't know, how long has banding been your pastor?
Yeah, I've been with Banning since like 2008. Was
Wow.
when I first started connecting, and yeah, and for people who doesn't know, I came out in like 2007. I went to the ministry school up at Bethel. So that was '07. I met Banning in '08, and then I started leading worship, I think, for like a morning session at a local Jesus Culture conference in '09. It's the first time I kind of jumped in and started leading worship. And actually, when I first started doing stuff with Banning, he was taking over. He was helping create a sister campus in town up at Reading, and he was launching that in like a high school or a college gymnasium. And I went over to help kind of lead worship consistently there. But two things that are crazy that really stand out about the journey. Number one is I was 18 years old back in Northwest Indiana when Jesus Culture, everything, the very first CD they ever put out, somehow through our worship team, like I get this CD and I hear this just radical worship and prayer, and I was rocked, man. I mean, I heard that and I knew, like, my heart is alive when I hear that. Like, there's something about that God's on, and that God, I feel like, is calling me to. And it wasn't that much later that we ended up going out to the school of ministry there. And but man, that's part of it. I mean, Jesus Culture is a part of their ministry. The fruit of their ministry is a part of my spiritual history with God. That's part of how I'm so deeply impacted.
Yeah.
It's part of what inspired me to lead worship. Now, I've been a songwriter for as long as I can remember. I've been a musician for my whole life. But my journey with leading worship, so much of that started with those early Jesus Culture songs. So man, I had that experience all the way up to coming out and just beginning to meet these guys and starting to run with them. And I'd probably only been leading worship for like 2 years when I came out, and I went through the school of ministry, and what was probably in the moment felt like a long time, but what was probably only about a year. Because that's how it is when you're young. Everything feels like it's taking forever. But really, it was like 9 months to 12 months or something. Started jumping in and leading worship at Bethel a little consistently. And so I was into doing it, trying to like learn from Kim and from Chris and Brian Johnson. And, and in my head, I'm like super intimidated. I don't belong here at all. I don't even know what I'm doing. And so I just had to kind of come in and just try to watch and learn and observe and jump into that. And, I think I've been able to glean from some amazing worship leaders. So I love that, for anybody who would, even in my songwriting and writing worship songs and in the way I probably lead worship, I probably have the DNA of about 10 different worship leaders just kind of jammed in there, just people who've marked me and been able to watch some of them up close too, behind the scenes.
Yeah.
And see what it was that really gave them authority in that place anyway,
Have you, this just random question, but I just thought of this. Have you ever had persecution for the community that you've run with? Have you ever had moments where people are like, hey man, like, we don't understand your style of worship? Because I know you're going to encourage hands to be raised. You're going to encourage people to be free and jump. And I know sometimes in other streams, it can be very different. And I'm pretty sure, I love what God's doing with the worship movement right now, because I feel like the worship movement is crossing denominational lines. You could have the most conservative church on the planet that is singing a Bethel song. And so it's like, have you navigated any persecution for your community, or just being it that you're like, man, I had to love people through this, or, I've really had to, in a loving way, just say, hey, like, this is who I am. I'm always going to encourage, I'm going to honor you, but man, I want people to lift their hands, or I want people to shout. I want people to sing.
Yeah. I think what's kind of amazing, and I would say so much of this really comes out of just the culture that I think Bethel Church so championed, and its massive values for us here at Jesus Culture. And it is this core value of just honor. And so the crazy thing, man, and this is actually really true, is in my years of traveling and going around and leading worship, it's exactly what you're saying. Worship has this incredible ability to open doors into places that wouldn't normally be open. So I've been able to go in and lead worship across so many different denominational lines and environments where, it just is not what we do. But at the same time, and I really think, any worship leaders, this is something you could learn from in this moment. I would go into environments of different streams, different churches, different styles. And every single time, whether it was like the worship pastor was the one who brought me in for this conference or event, or maybe it was a senior pastor, getting a chance to sit with them in a car ride from the airport, to the sound check or whatever, and going, hey, what's on your heart for this conference? Like, what is it that you're wanting to see God do? Why did you ask me to come here?
Yeah.
Like what is it that's on your heart? Because I want to serve you. I want to serve what you're doing. I want to serve what God's doing here. That doesn't mean that I won't be me. But you asked me to come So I'm assuming you have an idea of what we're about. And what I've found in most of the environments asked me to come in, they were doing it because they were hungry. They were hungry to see like what God's been doing in our ministry. They're like, we want to see that happen here because we're so encouraged by it. We're so stirred by it. So I truthfully, throughout the years, I have, and I know, man, there's totally critics out there. There are people who like get freaked out and say we're a cult and all the stuff that people say, you know. And I'm like, yeah, you know, those are people who have absolutely no insight into who Derek Johnson, the dad, the
True.
father, friend is. You'd know pretty simply, I'm a normal guy, literally rescued by Jesus, trying to read my scripture every day and be like Jesus. So however that fits into your cult grid, I don't know.
Yeah.
Probably mess it up a little bit, I would assume. But man, I've been so honored by people throughout the years, just in traveling and being on the road and just being so welcomed with open arms. And dude, 100%, I've gone into situations where like I knew the stream that I was going into, and I'm like, I don't know how this is going to go, but man, I just believe God's sending me to go there anyway.
So good.
And I would honor them, and they've been so incredibly honorable towards me. And we've
So
seen
good.
God break through and do stuff there that I think
Yeah.
they were really excited to see God do.
So good, man. Well, man, I got one more question before we jump off, if that's cool.
Yeah.
How
Sure.
have you navigated criticism? I know I'm a musician. Whenever I put up some blues video, I'm not gonna lie, I look for those nice comments. No one likes to see, oh, that, you know, that was terrible, or oh man, like, I don't know, you know, I've been around music long enough. My dad's a musician. I'm a musician. How have you navigated criticism in your life as a worship leader, where your life's on public display, like all aspects of it? How do you navigate when someone criticizes you or criticizes your method, your family, whatever it is?
Yeah. I mean, you know, I think the funny thing about it isn't easy for anybody. I don't think, you know, I mean, even if they kind of have a real nice thick skin they've developed, where they're like, oh yeah, yeah, I don't think so. It's hard, man. It takes practice learning how to sift through it, how to hear it, how to not get overly emotional about it. But particularly if you're a creative, if you're an artist, if you've got someone critiquing, you know, some musical skill that you've been just like busting your butt trying to craft and work super hard on, it is difficult, man. It hits really hard. But I think for me, it's been a process of just trying to embrace the humility of it and realize, like, if I don't put all of my stock, if I don't put all of my value, if I don't put all of my ego in how great my playing is or how great my song is or whatever, then, you know, it doesn't rip me apart if it's not received super well. And that is really difficult because for most creatives, our art is literally an extension of ourselves, you know.
Wow.
We were talking about it earlier about the psalmist and all that. I'm like, for me, even before I met Jesus and encountered the Lord, music, art, songwriting, creativity, all of it was like therapy for me. Always has been. It's like things are going crazy, things are feeling chaotic. I'm going to get down, I'm going to write a song about it. I'm going to now I'm beginning to process it and get it out there. So
yeah, so
it
good.
is an extension of ourselves, but I think we just have to learn, you know, some practical ways to put ourselves in the spot of receiving feedback. And so if you're a part of a local worship team, that's going to happen. You're going to have people are going to correct you when you hit the wrong note, and they should, and you should welcome that. And it's not going to be easy, you know. And I think every time that happens and you get that little rub on your ego, it's a beautiful moment to let go of your need to protect that thing so fiercely. And I believe that is a massive part of the process of, I think that's the process of following Jesus, right? It's just, this kind of consistently this idea of take up your cross, follow me, leave that stuff behind. Well, for many of us, if you're a creative, some of that's going to be your ego. Some of that's going to be all the stock you've put into, I mean, it's something I'm trying to tell our worship team all the time. You might be an awesome lead guitar player. Great. That's like 1/20th of who you are.
Yeah.
Maybe even less, right? That is not what I'm concerned about. But for a lot of us who are musicians and creatives, that's our whole identity. So part of the journey is kind of unmarrying that. Hey, who is Chris the guy? Like, who are you the man following Jesus? That's going to be the piece that's going to give you way more confidence. So when someone comes along and they're like, bro, that lead line was way off, you're going to feel a lot less insecure when you're like, yeah, it was off. You're totally right. I wish I didn't make that mistake, and it never feels good to make one, but I'm gonna do better the next time, you know.
So
But it's hard, man. It's hard. It's a process, and I'm a very sensitive guy. So I mean, my wife would be the first to tell you the amount of times I've like showed her a song, and if her reaction's just kind of like baseline reaction, I'm like, was it not good? What, you know?
yeah.
I'm instantly insecure. So I get that, man. But I think that's part of the journey.
Yeah.
Is learning how to let that go. And I'd say for like songwriters and musicians, when you get in those collaborative moments and you're in groups of people and you can like write songs together and you're going to invite feedback, that's the best muscle to flex in the world. You don't want to be the one person who has never had anyone tell you that you're playing a wrong note. Because that's going to sting really hard the first time. You're going to need to hear it about 100 times before
So
you're
good.
able to swallow it down a little better.
So good.
So just rip off the Band-Aid and welcome it, you know?
So good. Derek, thank you so much, man, for your time. Man, dude, we so honor you and your wife and what you guys are doing. It's crazy. I think I first met you with Charles Rigby.
Yes, that's right.
Back when I was preaching in Madeira, you were leading, and it's such an honor that so many years later we can still be connected, man. I look forward to going down with you guys, hanging, having a meal.
Yes.
But man, we love you guys so much, and again, thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, bro. Thank you so much for having me on. Thanks for everything you guys are doing, man. It's important, and pretty soon things are going to open up. We're going to get back at it. So
yeah, let's do it, man. Well, man, we'll repost this up on YouTube, but when we do, I'll shoot you a text. But we love you and your wife, man. Thank you guys for everything, man, and we'll talk soon.
Yes, love you, bro.
All right, we'll see you, man.
Have a great day. Peace.